debt she couldn't afford. The Mafia boss saw everything. The pen was in her hand. The contract was on the table. The man sitting across from her hadn't raised his voice once. He didn't need to. The bruise on her wrist from 40 minutes ago in the parking garage said everything his mouth didn't. Sign it, Ren, or Callum is in foster care by Friday. She looked down at the document. Marriage contract. Her name printed beside a line that would erase everything she had left. Her hand moved toward the page. She didn't see the man watching through the glass panel of the office door, but he saw her, and he saw everything. Ren Callister was about to sign her life away to a man who spent 2 years engineering this exact moment. And the man watching from the corridor is the last person in Memphis. Subscribe and hit that bell, because this story goes deeper than you think, and you don't want to miss what's coming. Ren Callister was 25 years old and running on nothing. Her mother, Isla, a Memphis jazz musician with a voice that could quiet a room and hands that made a piano sound like a conversation, died when Ren was 19. Her father disappeared a year later. No insurance, no savings, no family. Just Ren and her 17-year-old brother Callum in a rented apartment on the south side of Memphis, surviving on double shifts and the kind of stubbornness that looks like strength until you get close enough to see the cracks. Ren wasn't weak. She'd raised a teenager alone since she was 20, kept the lights on, kept him in school, kept food in the fridge through a combination of housekeeping shifts at the Peabody Hotel and sheer refusal to quit. She was exhausted and broke, but she was standing. And sometimes standing is the bravest thing a person can do. Locke Pembridge saw her standing and decided to fix that. Locke was 43, Memphis shipping magnate, philanthropist, magazine covers and charity galas, and a handshake that opened every door in Tennessee. He sat on the board of the Children's Foundation. He donated to arts programs. The press called him a cultural visionary. What the press didn't know was that Locke Pembridge collected people the way other men collected watches. Carefully, patiently, with an eye for value and a plan for use. He identified Ren 2 years ago. Not randomly, deliberately. He knew things about her that she didn't know about herself. Things connected to her mother's legacy that made Ren valuable in ways she couldn't imagine. But Ren would never agree to what he wanted willingly, so he didn't ask. He engineered. First, he bought the building she lived in through a shell company, tripled the rent. Ren scrambled to cover it, picking up extra shifts until her hands cracked from bleach and her back ached through the night. Then he called in a favor at the hotel management company. Ren was terminated. Restructuring, they told her. Every application she submitted after that went nowhere. Every callback she expected never came. Locke's connections touched every hospitality company in Memphis, like invisible fingers pressing doors shut one by one. Within 8 months, Ren had no job, no savings, and a rent bill she couldn't meet. Callum needed school supplies. The electricity was 2 weeks from being cut. She was drowning in slow motion, and she couldn't see the hand holding her under, because that hand was wearing a silk glove and smiling for cameras across town. Then Locke appeared. Not as the man who'd destroyed her, as the man who could save her. He came through a mutual connection, a woman at Callum's school who happened to be on the board of one of Locke's nonprofits. A meeting was arranged. Coffee. Locke was warm, attentive, concerned. He offered a solution, a marriage contract. Not romantic, he assured her. A partnership. Sign it and Callum gets a full scholarship to a private academy. Sign it and the apartment is secure. Sign it and the financial pressure disappears. Refuse and Child Protective Services receives a report about a minor living in an apartment with no electricity, no food, and a guardian who can't provide basic necessities. Callum would be in foster care by Friday. Locke delivered this last part with the calm warmth of a man ordering dessert. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The architecture of 2 years of patient destruction had already done the screaming. Tonight, in the back office of a Memphis law firm at 9 p.m. Building empty, no witnesses. Locke's personal lawyer sitting in the corner, studying his shoes. Ren sat at the table with the contract in front of her and the pen in her hand, and the bruise on her wrist from where Locke had grabbed her in the parking garage when she'd hesitated getting out of the car. Her hand moved toward the signature line. The door opened. Thane Maddox walked in like the room had been waiting for him. 36 years old. He ran Memphis's underground with a stillness that made dangerous men leave buildings. He didn't posture. He didn't perform. His silence carried more weight than other men's weapons. He was in the building because his fixer was handling a property transfer on the floor above. He'd been cutting through the back corridor toward the garage when he stopped at the glass panel and read the room in 3 seconds. A woman at a table, a bruise she was hiding with her sleeve. A man across from her with the posture of a man who already owned what he was buying. Thane picked up the contract, read the first page in silence. Locke's lawyer stood. Locke stayed seated, his expression calcifying. "This is a private legal matter." Thane looked at Ren. "Did you have a lawyer review this?" Ren shook her head. Thane folded the contract and slid it into his jacket pocket. "She will now." Locke stood. The room compressed. Something dangerous flickered behind his philanthropist's smile. Thane met it with nothing, just flat, steady eyes and the energy of a man who had never once in his life needed to prove he was serious. Thane turned to Ren. He didn't grab her. He extended his hand. Open, palm up. "You don't have to stay in this room." Ren looked at his hand, looked at Locke, looked at the bruise Locke had left on her wrist. She took Thane's hand and stood. His grip was firm and gentle, the first touch in 2 years that didn't come with a price. In the car, Thane draped his jacket over her shoulders without a word. She hadn't asked. The car was warm, but she was shaking, adrenaline crashing out of her. She pulled the jacket close and breathed in clean wool and something sharp underneath, and the shaking slowed. They drove to a townhouse in Cooper Young. Quiet street, no public record. Ren walked inside. The front door had a deadbolt that turned from the inside. She tested it, locked it, unlocked it, locked it again. Her hand stayed on the knob. The lock was hers. The choice was hers. Thane stood in the hallway behind her. "Callum is being picked up from school right now. He'll be here within the hour. No one touches him." Ren nodded. She closed the door, slid to the floor with her back against it, pressed her palms over her eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, the door was locked from her side. Callum came through the door 53 minutes later, confused, scared, a 17-year-old boy with his sister's stubborn jaw and their mother's eyes. Ren held him in the hallway and told him they were safe. She didn't explain everything, not yet. She just held him and let him believe it, because right now, believing was the only thing keeping either of them upright. That night, after Callum fell asleep in the room next to hers, Ren tested her bedroom door again, locked it, unlocked it, left it open. She stood in the frame listening to the quiet of a house that didn't feel like a trap, and tried to remember the last time silence hadn't made her flinch. Thane arrived the next morning. He sat across from her at the kitchen table with a folder, while Callum ate cereal in the other room, earbuds in, temporarily insulated from the weight of what was happening 10 feet away. "I've been tracking Locke Pembridge for 5 months, Thane said. "Not because of you, because his shipping containers don't match their manifests. But that contract you almost signed gave me a new thread." He opened the folder. Ren leaned in. The marriage contract wasn't just a legal binding. Buried in 14 pages of dense legal language was a clause granting Locke full power of attorney over Ren's inherited estate. Ren stared at the words. "I don't have an estate." "You do." Thane laid it out. Her mother, Isla Callister, had placed her entire music catalog, original jazz compositions spanning 20 years of work, into a trust before she died. Ren was the sole beneficiary. The trust activated when she turned 25. Her birthday was 6 weeks away. The catalog was worth an estimated $12 million in licensing revenue: film, television, streaming, live performance rights. Isla's music had never stopped being valuable. It had just been waiting for Ren to be old enough to claim it. Locke knew. He'd tried to acquire the gold. Every offer was rejected by the trust's executor, a retired attorney in Nashville who'd honored Isla's wishes to the letter. So Locke built another path. 2 years of patient destruction, the eviction, the job loss, the financial suffocation, all designed to force Wren into a marriage contract that would hand in legal control of the catalog the moment her birthday arrived. The $400,000 debt Locke had dangled wasn't real. There was no debt. There was only a man who wanted a dead woman's music and was willing to erase her daughter to get it. Wren sat very still. Her mother's compositions. The songs she grew up hearing through apartment walls. Melodies she could still play from memory. Every note, every pause, every breath. Isla built into the music like punctuation. Locke hadn't just come for Wren, he'd come for her mother. And that shifted something inside her that fear alone had never been able to move. "What else?" she said. Thane pushed the rest of the folder across the table. They worked through the day and into the night. Thane sat across from her, reading, never hovering. At some point he brought her coffee without being asked. She looked up. He was already back in his chair. She wrapped her hands around the mug and felt something loosen in her chest. A knot she'd been carrying so long it had started to feel like part of her. Late that night, Wren came downstairs and found Thane at the kitchen table reading. She sat across from him. Neither spoke. The silence between them was easy, warm, undemanding, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. She caught herself studying his face in the lamplight, the way his jaw held tension even at rest, the way his eyes moved across the page with patience. She looked away before he noticed. He noticed anyway, said nothing. The next afternoon, Wren found the piano, an old upright in the living room, pushed against the wall like an afterthought. She sat down while Callum was upstairs doing homework. Her fingers found the keys and she played one of her mother's compositions from memory. Slow, aching. Every note a conversation with a woman who wasn't there anymore. Halfway through, the grief hit so hard it stopped her hands. She pressed her palms flat against the keys and sat there, breathing, trying to hold the pieces together. She looked up. Thane was standing in the doorway. He didn't speak. He didn't come closer. He leaned against the frame and nodded once. Like the music mattered. Like her pain mattered. Like she didn't need to finish if finishing cost too much. Wren looked back at the keys. She didn't finish. But she didn't close the lid. 2 days later, Locke appeared on the evening news. A charity fundraiser at the Memphis Country Club. Golden smile, firm handshake. The mayor on one side and a state senator on the other. The anchor called him one of Memphis's most generous cultural patrons. Wren watched from the safe house couch. Something crystallized inside her. Not broke. Crystallized. The man on that screen was about to steal a dead woman's music and dress it up as philanthropy. He wasn't powerful. He was a costume with nothing underneath. She wasn't the broken one. He was. She went back to the documents, deeper this time, and the floor gave way. Locke's shipping operation wasn't just commercial cargo. His containers were moving counterfeit luxury goods through Memphis port. $40 million annually in fake products distributed through shell retail stores across the South. His partner was a corrupt customs inspector named Devereaux, who pre-cleared Locke's shipments so they bypassed inspection entirely. But 3 months ago, a container was misrouted to the wrong warehouse. A dock worker opened it and found crates of falsified customs declarations and import licenses. He reported it. 2 weeks later, he was found dead in the river, ruled a drowning. Thane's people had recovered copies of the documents before they disappeared. Wren closed the folder. She stood up. She walked into the room where Thane was reviewing port surveillance and set the documents on his desk. "My mother spent 20 years writing music that made people feel something," Wren said. Her voice was low and steady and shaking at the edges. She died broke because she gave everything to the art. And this man who has never created a single beautiful thing in his life, wants to take it and use it to wash money from a smuggling operation. The steadiness broke. Everything she'd held in, The isolation, the fear, Callum's confused face, 2 years of doors closing one by one, came pouring out. Not a scream. Words. Specific, devastating, unfiltered words that had been locked inside her long enough to fossilize. Thane didn't move. He listened. When she finished, raw-voiced and trembling, he said, "Good. You have a voice. Use it." Wren wiped her face, her jaw set. "I don't want him dead. I want every person who ever shook his hand to see what he is. I want him to lose his name, his money, and his freedom. And I want my mother's music back." The Memphis River Arts Gala, 3 weeks out. An annual black tie event at the Orpheum Theater, where Locke Pembridge was being honored for his contributions to Memphis cultural preservation. The evening's centerpiece, a live tribute performance featuring selections from Isla Callister's jazz catalog, music Locke intended to legally own within weeks. The governor, the mayor, 400 guests, full press coverage, live streamed across Tennessee. Wren intended to use every camera in that theater. Thane's tech specialist, Asha, quiet, precise, the kind of woman who could crack a firewall while carrying a conversation about weather, held a catering contract with the Orpheum through one of Thane's legitimate business fronts. She'd have access to the AV system 2 hours before curtain. The screens flanking the stage would be hijacked mid-ceremony during the tribute performance. 4 seconds to switch the feed. "One shot," Asha said. "If anything looks doctored, they spin it as a hack and Locke walks." "It won't look doctored," Wren said, "because it isn't." She spent the next 2 weeks building the evidence package. The marriage contract with the power of attorney clause highlighted. The music catalog trust documents proving Wren was sole legal owner. Financial records showing the shell licensing company Locke had already built to siphon royalties, a company registered in Wren's name without her knowledge. Shipping manifests for the counterfeit goods operation, customs fraud documentation, the dock worker's real autopsy report, blunt force trauma to the skull, not drowning, beside the falsified police report that had buried his death. Then she found the last piece, the one that turned everything sideways. She was going through files Thane's people had cloned from Locke's home office when she opened a subfolder labeled Archive. Inside was a marriage contract, not hers, a different woman's name, Gemma Voss, dated 3 years ago. Same structure, same dense legal language, same power of attorney clause buried in the middle. Wren searched for Gemma Voss. The results came back in seconds. Missing persons report filed by her family 26 months ago. Investigation went nowhere. Gemma was 24 when she married Locke. She disappeared 11 months into the marriage. Her family was told she'd gone abroad. They didn't believe it, but couldn't prove otherwise. Wren went deeper. Gemma's signature appeared on dozens of Locke's financial documents, customs filings, shell company registrations, import license applications. The same pattern. A woman isolated, married, papered into a criminal operation, used until her identity was saturated with liability, and then vanished. Erased so completely that a missing persons report gathered dust in a filing cabinet, and no one with the power to investigate bothered to look. Wren stared at Gemma's photograph. 24 years old, dark hair, a smile that looked like it was trying to convince itself everything was fine. She wasn't looking at a stranger. She was looking at a mirror. One that showed her exactly where she'd be in 11 months if she didn't finish this. She added Gemma's photograph and contract to the evidence package. Her hands were steady. Locke wasn't idle. He'd filed a legal motion claiming Wren had abandoned the marriage contract under duress from a third party. His lawyers sought a court order to compel her return. His police connections squeezed Thane's territory. A surprise inspection on a Cooper Young warehouse, patrol cars circling the block at odd hours. The net was tightening. Every day Wren stayed hidden was a day Locke's legal narrative grew stronger and his public sympathy deepened. Thane's people found Marcus, not a boy this time, but a key witness of a different kind. A former port supervisor named Carver, who'd been fired after questioning manifests on Locke's containers. Carver had kept copies of everything: shipping logs, delivery schedules, Photographs of containers being offloaded at night. He'd been too afraid to come forward. Ren visited him personally. She sat across from him in a diner on Poplar Avenue and told him about Ruth. No, told him about Gemma, a woman who disappeared because she knew too much and had no one standing beside her when it mattered. Carver looked at Ren for a long time. Then he slid a flash drive across the table. The night before the gala, Ren sat at the piano in the safe house. She played her mother's music, all the way through this time. Every note, every pause, every breath Isla had built into the composition like punctuation. The melody filled the house, and when the last chord faded, Ren sat in the silence that followed. Thane was beside her on the bench. She hadn't heard him sit down. His hand rested on the wood between them. "She would be proud of you," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd mentioned her mother directly. Ren's eyes filled, her hand closed over his. They sat at the piano in the dark, holding on, saying nothing, until the grief passed and something warmer settled in its place. Morning of the gala. Ren dressed in silence. The gown was deep midnight blue, Isla's favorite color. Not decoration, armor. Asha wired the earpiece behind her left ear, tested it twice. Callum was safe at the townhouse with Thane's people. He'd hugged her before she left and said, "Make them hear Mom's music for real this time." She'd held him tight enough to feel his heartbeat against her ribs. Ren walked downstairs. Thane was waiting. Dark suit, no tie. When he saw her, he went still. He didn't compliment her. He looked at her like she was the most dangerous thing in Memphis. She almost smiled. The Orpheum Theater. Gilded ceilings, velvet seats, 400 guests holding champagne with practiced elegance. Press cameras lined the mezzanine. Ren entered on Thane's arm. The whispers started before they reached the aisle. People recognized him. People recognized her. The woman from Locke's legal filing, the one who was supposed to be unstable, fragile, hiding. Instead, she walked through that theater like the music about to fill it had always been hers. Because it had. Locke saw her from across the lobby. His champagne glass paused midair. The mask held, barely. He crossed toward her, composure reassembled by habit. "Ren, darling, I'm relieved you've come to your..." Thane shifted his weight. The sentence died. Ren looked Locke in the eye. "You stole my mother's music. Tonight this room hears every note of the truth." The lights dimmed. The tribute began. A jazz quartet on the Orpheum stage playing Isla Callister's compositions. Live, beautiful, aching with the ghost of the woman who wrote them. The screens flanking the stage displayed photographs of Memphis's musical heritage. Locke stood near the front, basking in applause meant for a dead woman's genius. Mid-performance, the screens flickered, went dark, came back with new content. The marriage contract, the hidden clause, the music catalog trust, the shipping manifests, the dock worker's death, Carver's photographs, and Gemma Voss, her face, her contract, her missing persons report, staring out at 400 people from a screen the size of a stage wall, while her mother's music played underneath like a requiem for every woman Locke Pembridge had ever tried to erase. Locke stood in the light of his own destruction, and every camera in the Orpheum was already rolling. The first document was the marriage contract, Ren's name beside a signature line she'd nearly touched, with the power of attorney clause highlighted in yellow. The clause that would have handed Locke legal ownership of her mother's music, her mother's legacy, and every dollar it would ever generate. The second was the trust, Isla Callister's original filing, naming Ren as sole beneficiary. Beside it, the shell licensing company Locke had built to intercept the royalties, registered in Ren's name without her knowledge, designed to make her the face of a theft she'd never committed. The third was the shipping operation. Manifests, customs declarations, Carver's photographs of containers being offloaded at night, Devereaux's pre-clearance stamps on shipments that had never been inspected, $40 million in counterfeit goods flowing through Memphis port under the protection of a badge and a handshake. The fourth was the dock worker, his employee photograph beside the falsified police report, then the real autopsy, Blunt force trauma, not drowning. A man killed for opening the wrong container and having the courage to say something about it. The fifth was Gemma Voss. Her face filled the screen. Dark hair, quiet smile, 24 years old. Beside her photograph, the marriage contract identical to Ren's. Same structure, same clause, same trap. Then the missing persons report, filed 26 months ago, never investigated. A woman who disappeared into Locke Pembridge's machinery and never came out. Underneath it all, Isla Callister's music kept playing. The quartet hadn't stopped. The pianist's hands moved across the keys with the steady grace of music that belonged to the woman who wrote it, not the man who tried to steal it. The compositions filled the Orpheum like a pulse, alive, defiant, untouchable. The room cracked open. 400 people turned from the stage to the screens and back again. Donors set down their glasses. The governor's security moved toward the exits. Reporters on the mezzanine scrambled for cameras that were already rolling. A woman in the third row started crying, not from shock, but from recognition. She knew Gemma Voss. She'd gone to school with her. Locke tried the mask. He turned toward the nearest camera and his mouth opened with the automatic precision of a man who had talked his way out of every corner he'd ever been backed into. These documents are fabricated. This is a coordinated. The audio cut him off. His own voice, recorded in his home office by a device Asha had planted 2 weeks prior, filled the Orpheum through every speaker. Cold, specific, unmistakable. The Callister catalog is worth $12 million and climbing. Once the contract holds, I control the licensing through the shell. The girl signs, or the brother goes into the system. Either way, I get what I'm owed. The mask didn't crack. It evaporated. 400 people heard the man behind the philanthropy, and the sound of it emptied every expression of admiration from the room like air leaving a punctured lung. His allies moved first. Alderman connections excused themselves toward the lobby. Board members from his nonprofits turned their backs. Devereaux, watching from the balcony, bolted for the side stairwell and walked into 2 FBI agents who'd been waiting since an anonymous evidence package arrived that morning. FBI entered the main floor through the theater's west doors. 4 agents. They didn't rush. They moved with the unhurried certainty of men who already knew everything on those screens, and had simply been waiting for the curtain to rise on the right stage. Locke saw them. His shoulders collapsed inward. He looked across the theater at Ren, standing in the aisle, untouched, backlit by screens displaying his destruction while her mother's music played behind her. And for the first time in his life, Locke Pembridge had nothing left to perform. They cuffed him in the aisle of the Orpheum Theater, past every camera, past every donor, past the stage where Isla Callister's compositions were still filling the room with something honest. The flashbulbs didn't stop. Ren stood in the center of the theater. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She listened. Her mother's music, played live in a room full of people, without a thief's name attached to it. She closed her eyes and breathed, deep, full, free. And for the first time in 6 years, the music sounded the way it was supposed to. 6 months later, a reclaimed building on Beale Street with a sign above the door in clean black letters. The Isla Callister Music Foundation. Free music education for underserved youth in Memphis, funded by the recovered publishing royalties from a catalog that had finally come home. Ren ran it. She taught piano to children who'd never touched a keyboard. She played her mother's compositions at the opening night concert. Every note, no stopping. The grief still there, but transformed into something that fed the music, instead of silencing it. Callum was thriving. A real scholarship. He volunteered on weekends, helping younger kids with theory and scales. He looked at his sister like she'd rebuilt the world with her hands. He wasn't wrong. Locke Pembridge was sentenced to 28 years. Customs fraud, smuggling, financial crimes, accessory to murder. The investigation into Gemma Voss's disappearance was reclassified as a suspected homicide. Her family wept in the courtroom. For the first time in 3 years, someone was looking for their daughter. Thane walked into the foundation on a quiet Tuesday evening. The coiled tension that had lived in his frame was softer. He'd stepped back from operations, restructured, investing in legitimate music venues along Beale Street. He found Ren at the piano. She turned to him. That afternoon in the safe house, I was playing my mother's music and I couldn't finish. The grief hit too hard. She paused. I looked up and you were standing in the doorway. You didn't say keep going. You didn't say it's okay. You didn't come closer. You just leaned against the frame and nodded. Her eyes were bright. Like the music mattered, like my pain mattered, like I didn't have to finish if finishing cost too much. Every man I've known tried to push me through the pain or pretend it wasn't there. You stood in the doorway and let me feel it. That's when I knew. Thane stepped forward. Ren closed the distance. The kiss was hers, her choice, her timing. Not because he saved her, because he showed her she could save herself. Because he stood in a doorway and understood that sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is simply stay. A federal holding cell. Lock Pembridge on a thin mattress, plexiglass TV. The anchor's voice. The Isla Callister Music Foundation celebrated its first graduating class tonight with a live concert on Beale Street. Founder Ren Callister dedicated the performance to her mother's legacy and to Gemma Voss, whose case remains under active federal investigation. Locke stared at the screen. His hand found the remote. He pressed the button. Darkness. Silence. The kind that doesn't lift. He sat in it, and he lived with it. If this one hit you somewhere unexpected, you'd play on opening night. Share this with someone who needs to hear that the contract you almost signed doesn't define you. It drops.